Alright Diablo players, so this is going to be a video dedicated to why you do not want to play any of these mythics on the bottom. We're talking about the F tier mythics, the items that basically no one actually plays at the high level of the game. And I get it, there's a bunch of brand new players coming into the game as it recently went free on PlayStation, so I see posts like this very similar all the time over on Reddit as well as other forums. They're just like, guys, I got my first mythic drop, and then you have to unfortunately tell them their item sucks. Like, this post was actually removed from the mods, but basically what the player did was he's like, I got the Shattered Vow, I want to see what other builds exist with this brand new mythic item. He was probably super excited, but just like a lot of people find out, a lot of the mythics in this game suck and you do not want to play them. Just because it's a purple item, I know that they're more rare and I know it's super exciting, but there are certain ones that are so garbage that you do not want to play. A lot of people are being like, yeah, it's a very nice spark you got, meaning that you are basically salvaging it. There is no point to using these items. But instead of just saying, okay, these items over in the F tier, they're bad, don't play them, I wanted to dedicate a video to explain kind of why, as this is an area where you can learn and understand maybe why you do not want to play this mythic. So a lot of the weapons kind of come down to one very specific thing, but it does encompass a lot of the reasons why the mythic uniques are essentially garbage, especially in the weapon department for a majority of builds. So let's go ahead and go over all of the ones that we do not want to play. So first off, the good ones, just to kind of reference them, the Shroud of False Death, the Air of Perdition, the Harlequin Crest, Ring of the Starless Skies are all fantastic in pretty much every single build. There are some niche builds where if you want to fit Interials for extra survivability or a Doombringer for extra survivability, it's so-so. And then also Grandfather is like so-so in some builds. It depends on the build that you are playing. Specifically the Barbarian. For the Necromancer though, there's not really any builds that really make really great use of it, at least in the game's current state. So what it comes down to is really just a numbers game. So if I was to use these two items as an example right here, we have, for example, the item right here where it says that our chance for earthquakes to cast twice. That is one of the biggest areas in which the item gets a huge power boost. And then on top of that, you usually get to have the aspect that rolls with twice the amount of stats. So in this case over here, we have earthquakes being able to do 120% X increased damage. That is too big to give up, especially if you were to compare it with, let's say, Shattered Vow. Let's say you are playing some sort of damage over time build, as that's the area where this item would maybe kind of excel. I say kind of because there really isn't any build that makes use of this. Even if you were to do a damage over time, you could play a much better aspect that would give you a big multiplier, and then you could have whatever is activating that skill either hit 2 times or deal double damage. Therefore, that area right there where I highlighted the earthquakes, or again, it could be whirlwind, it could be any other skills that you are using to essentially cast twice. That is a huge area where the Shattered Vow, or a lot of the mythics in general, really lose their power. And then on top of that, you're losing out on the aspect. So on top of that, you also lose out on max life. That's a huge stat that a lot of items really want to try to get, otherwise your build kind of feels squishy towards the end game. And especially if we were to get, like, let's say your core stat, like the strength over here, getting that to be greater affix is so common. Same thing with max life. These two stats in general are very, very common to roll, and having them to be greater affix really helps out. So in terms of like numbers game, I kind of visually showed you them, but I also want to go over kind of the text here. So in general, again, most of the time the mythics are bad in specifically the weapon department. So this will kind of cover all of them. So just for references, on a one-handed, and this is like an estimate here. So you can get about a 200%-ish additive damage. So looking at this right here, we can get, let's say, crit damage or vulnerable damage. And then you usually can temper on damage while berserking. You can do damage with cutthroat skills, marksman skills, fire skills, if you're playing Hydra or whatever. There's a lot of these that kind of tie into it. And so this is another reason why you would lose out on a big amount of damage. And then again, losing out on the aspect is pretty big already for a one-hander. But when you go into a two-hander, this all gets multiplied times 2, which is pretty big, because remember, in your weapon with your aspect, it doubles the amount of stats if it is a two-handed. So it comes down to really about this in a one-handed. You get like 20 to 50% chance for skills to do double damage or activate 2 times, but on a two-handed, you can get 300 plus additive damage. Like if we look at this where we go to vulnerable damage right there, and then also damage with dual wielded weapons. So again, adding those together, you're getting like 300 plus in your additive department. And then also, you can lose up to like 100x damage. Usually whatever aspect that you have that goes into your build will essentially have your thing multiplied times 2. That could be, let's say, like it goes up to like 50% X damage, but if it's on a 200, that can go up to 100x damage. This is a huge area. Usually you're best in slot, like for your aspect in terms of damage. It all comes down to this, whether you're playing Incinerate, Hydra. There's a lot of the ones where you can maybe get a huge boost from your aspect in this department. Then you're also getting double the amount of max life and main stat. A lot of times for like here, you can see the amount of strength that it's giving. 236 versus 472. Like you get a massive amount of your character's core stat, which is pretty big because it is another multiplier in your build. So that's one of the main reasons why the weapons over here. So covering kind of all the weapons. Now, Doombringer is an exception to this rule, as Doombringer is amazing for survivability. It used to be good for damage when Overpower did scale off of HP, but in Season 9, this is a brand new update where Overpower just lost a lot of the strength that it actually had. So you would no longer need to stack a bunch of HP to get more damage. So Doombringer basically loses out because of this. Shatter Vow, again, all of these just come down to, like, again, damage multipliers. Now, the Spear of Lycander is a very interesting, unique, because it's all based around shrines, but there used to be this bonus when you had a shrine effect. They actually deleted this stat out of the game. But getting, like, things like all stats, well, that's a good stat. Resistances and survivability and movement speed, these are all terrible stats to have on a weapon. You want damage on your weapon. Now, the lucky chance to restore primary resource is basically worthless. They've scaled all of the chances to get primary resource to be way higher. You don't need this anymore at all. So essentially all you're getting with this is all stats. Now, you do have a special unique power over here where you get the random shrine effect. Oh, also, by the way, real quick for Shadow Vow, this doesn't really matter because a lot of the dot builds, at least this season, they do the damage so fast it doesn't really matter. But going over the unique power for the Spear of Lycander here, that ability to gain that shrine effect for 20 seconds after killing an enemy, a lot of the shrines don't have the amount of power. Like Conduit in Diablo 3 is a very, very powerful thing, but in Diablo 4, a lot of these shrines aren't as powerful as they really should be, and unless they buff the shrines up to let you basically one-tap things, this thing is just worthless, because again, you're losing out on the double damage skills that activate twice, and all of those other stats. Now, Grandfathers, I mentioned before, is okay. I'm not going to consider this one in the garbage category if we're doing a tier list. It's like in the mid here. There are some builds that can make use out of it because you get a massive amount of critical strike damage, which is pretty excellent, but Grandfather again is not terrible, so I'm not going to cover it in this video, but it does, again, kind of suffer from the same problems depending on the build that you're playing. Maybe you can't really scale crit as well, but maybe you really need that other two-handed aspect. It's pretty big to lose on, but that one is viable. As far as Melted Heart of Selig, this goes into the next section here, which I want to talk about, which is the Amulet department. So a lot of times in the Amulet department, getting greater affixes or ranks to specifically any of the passives on your character's tree is pretty big. So to kind of go over that in terms of like numbers on the Amulet, they do definitely range from like 5 to 10x damage. So if we get like plus like 3 points or 6 points in here, again, when you are getting greater affixes or masterworking, because if you're getting triple passives here, it doesn't really matter too much where the masterwork hits. Most of the multipliers are anywhere from, again, 5 to 10x, but you can get 30 to 70x damage per passive, which is the biggest upgrade on your character. This is the huge area where you can get a big amount of power. It all comes down to the amulet, and this is why Melted Heart of Selig sucks. Plus, on the aspect, you could also get a 50% bonus on the amulet department, whether you put it like, let's say, Hoda, or it doesn't really matter. Basically, you just get a 50% bonus. So if it goes to, let's say, like 50x, it would then go to 75x because you get a 50% bonus on the amulet. So again, you're losing out on that, and it depends on the build, but you can get anywhere from 45 to 75x damage on average. It depends on, again, what the aspect actually is. But if we were to look at, let's say, Melted Heart of Selig right here, in terms of what that actual item gives us, resource generation is a pretty mid stat. You also get movement speed, which again, that you can really easily get max movement speed in Diablo, and then the damage reduction while healthy, again, that's like a defensive stat. There's probably even better passives that you can get that give you extra survivability. And then the special ability of gaining extra max resource. There are some builds where you can get a multiplier per resource, but that'd be like the only area where you're getting extra like big damage. And then on top of that, when you take damage, 75% of it is drained as maximum resource. If you really want survivability, I guess you can go for that, but you're much better off on running, let's say, Tyrell's Might, which is considered in like the mid tier right now, because everyone runs this. The reason why Shroud of False Death is so good is all your key passives kind of get tagged here, and this is like a 30x multiplier and like 30% plus damage reduction if you add it all up. But Tyrell's Might over here, even though this one I put it in the mid tier, I'm not going to talk about it in this one. I'm mainly focusing in on the garbage ones. Darius has just gotten nerfed too much. They scaled everything in the game and they didn't really give that one any buffs, and that's kind of unfortunate. That's why Azrath is better than Andariel's, which is the Mythic unique. And I know it seems super strange, but all it really comes down to is this lucky hit chance to do that poison. The lucky hit chance is actually a lot lower than what you have with Azrath, and Azrath just scales much better. The thing that is kind of nice is you do get some attack speed, which is good, but overall, again, it's just that it doesn't give you enough damage. The reason why, if you were to compare Andariel's with, let's say, a good helmet like the Air of Perdition, that's half of your crit potentially right there if you get it masterworked and if you have the good GA, or the core skills is a big damage multiplier, plus you also get 60x damage, and then you get another 200% damage to angels and demons. It's obviously right now we can only really benefit off of demons, but later in the expansions, more likely that's going to be something that actually gives us a little bit of a small amount of damage. But again, when you're comparing anything to Air of Perdition, this is like the best in slot for damage. And then for survivability, the Harlequin Crest is pretty good too, plus giving you all the skills is not a bad stat at all to actually get. But there's also one more unique that we do got to go over, which is in the Seekum, the Herald. This used to give you crazy amounts of to all skills, but unfortunately the item really lost out on the value when they nerfed it. Before it even came out, they nerfed it. So we already know overpowered damage is really hard to scale now because there's just not that much that can go into it because you need a lot more HP. But like you look at the damage numbers and it doesn't seem that bad. You just get like 200 to all stats. But the problem with it is like the special power is that like you can eventually mark an enemy and make them vulnerable, and then your attacks against them are guaranteed crits and overpower. Well, the problem is they recently nerfed overpower to the ground, so unfortunately that is a huge nerf, and then it's like every 2 seconds it's a random enemy, so again, your clear speed is going to be garbage. If you are one-shotting everything anyways, then it doesn't really matter, but it's then every 2 seconds you get this cool little effect. Maybe this one will get some play eventually, but a lot of the uniques, again, it just comes down to your skill. Like if you're playing Spiritborn, right, because this is the Mythic Glaive, you're hitting them like double times and then you lose out on that two-handed aspect. Again, goes back to the same thing, you're losing out on too much numbers. So it's really just kind of a numbers game for the most part, but I figured it was a really good idea just to make this video so I would explain to you guys versus just saying, hey, these bottom ones F tiers, they're bad, don't play them. But again, I think that teaching you guys the reasons why, which we went over, is going to really help you guys make yourselves a better Diablo player. That way, if any new Mythics come out, hopefully they'll be much better. But also, we probably need a Mythic buff, and we're going to talk about that in a future video very soon. But if you enjoyed the video, drop a like on it. If you're new here, hit subscribe, turn the bell if you want to learn more about Diablo as well as other action RPGs, because we've got an awesome game that I'm going to be covering very soon. Anyways, take care, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. But hopefully this helps anyone out. If you got a Mythic, yeah, a lot of them are bad. Don't play some of them.